Right, back with a bit more of an update on the car. Starting off with getting the headlights cleaned up. These were the original lights that came with the car, and all the rust had come off the front of the bonnet all over them, so I cleaned them up a few years ago just with a bit of a scouring pad and some soap. But now it's time just to freshen the back of them up. So just strip them all down, get all the dirt and dust off them, and then we'll give them a coat with some zinc paint. All the brackets and everything can just go through the aqua blaster just to bring them up a little bit. Still need to get a few more little clips for these where they bolt to the slam panel. And then on the glass I use a little bit of G3 polishing compound just to polish the lenses up a little bit, give them a bit of a shine. Just to get them out of the way, we'll just pop a cable tie around them just to hold them in place. I do need to get the bolts that go through the indicator that's attached to the side of the headlight as well. And then we move on to the brake servo, which never touched one of these before, and I've never seen anybody really have a go at restoring one, so I thought there's nothing really to lose on this. It looks a little bit beyond repair, so I thought we'll have a go. So I'll start with just working my way around the edge. These are just press fit into place, where just a little bit of metal bent over the side, so you can sort of see where water's run down around the master cylinder and then just ran down the front of the servo. Work my way around the edge, prying them all up a little bit. Just pop it in the vise and just work around the edge with a screwdriver. Eventually it'll pop open. See the spring shot out there. It's quite a good sized spring, so I just start to pull it apart a little bit. Nothing really much on the front cover. Then inside there's just the push rod. It sits on top of a really large rubber diaphragm. I guess really there's not a great reason to take these apart from getting into all the edges where all the old rust and paints gathered together made it look really crusty. But apart from the fact it looks a right state, it's actually not in bad condition. So all the metal seems pretty solid, so we'll just give it a good sand and wire brush down, try and get into all the pitted areas just to get rid of any leftover rust. The rubber diaphragm itself seems absolutely fine. It's not brittle or hold or anything. It feels fine. So I just used a bit of rubber and plastic cleaner just to give it a bit of a freshen up. Before I go to the trouble of fully painting this, what I've done is I've just painted around the inside edge and the outside edge on both pieces so I can actually rebuild the unit and then give it a test. So for now it's just reassembling in the opposite ways it all came apart. Just push the diaphragm back through, reattach the push rod, and then becomes the fight to get the front cover back on with this spring pushing against you all the time. Now it's not the strongest spring, but when you're doing these things by yourself it'd be nice to have another pair of hands. So I did wrap a couple of cable ties around it just to hold it in position so I can try and just get it seated right around the edge, and then tap the little locking pieces back into place. So I'll just try and go around evenly just to make sure that it's sat right, and then just go and tap the rest of them in. And then just to get rid of some of the pitting from the rust, just mixed up a little bit of body filler and just skim around the whole unit. Then just sand it flat. Now I would have tested this unit before I'd gone to the trouble of sanding it, but I'd ordered some little bungs for the vacuum pump and they hadn't arrived in time, so I just didn't want to delay, so just carried on. And once that was done, just masked the areas that I don't want any paint to get to, and then we just give it a few coats of some etch primer. With that all dry, the bungs arrived a few days later. There's actually solid bungs, just got a pack of universal ones off Amazon, and then just drilled a small little 4mm hole straight through the middle. Now, didn't actually really need that big bung in the middle. There is a rubber seal that sits in there, and it was actually doing its job fine. So all I did at that point was just pull a vacuum. Obviously, there's a little bit of air in there to start with, so it does take a few pumps to get it going. But you can see the gauge starting to go up, and it does hold a vacuum absolutely fine. I'm working on the theory that this unit's going to be fine to use. Then I gave it a couple of coats of gloss black, left it for a few days. Once the paint had gone nice and hard, I gave it a bit of a rub over with some very fine Scotch-Brite, and then managed to find the small block that I'd used, using some very fine sandpaper. Just went over any high spots just to try and flatten them out a little bit. And then we just finished off with a few coats of gloss black. It's not ideal painting things in a garage in these sort of temperatures, but managed to get it a little bit warm in there with a little electric heater. There's the final result. Certainly looks a lot different to how it was when it first started. The master cylinder that was on this car was ruined. Somebody used a load of sealer behind it and all sorts. I've managed to get a new one of them off eBay. I think that was about 60 quid. So I finally bit the bullet and bought some tyres for the wheels. Time to get all the suspension built back up and put back on. Been dying to get this car back on the ground. It's been on either a frame or a rotisserie now for the past 3 years plus. So it'll be nice to actually finally have some wheels on it. First bit is the rear tie rods. Just need to put new bushes in those. These are the original ones that was on the car. So I've just got a bush pulling kit, and you just put the bush in the sleeve and then just pull it through. Certainly makes it easier than using sockets and vices and things like that. And I actually got given this kit, so it's one of them things that you use once in a blue moon, but always handy to have. And once the bush is pulled through, just to get it leveled off in there, because it just sort of sit a little bit to one side, just put it over the vise and give it a smack with a hammer. So then these are the rear disc adapters. So again, these was bought from eBay. Get all the bolts with them as well. So these are to fit, I think, Sierra Cosworth 278mm rear discs on the back. You can either use Granada calipers or Sierra Cosworth calipers. I had already reassembled the rear hubs, so we just need to take a little bit of them apart just to get these fitted. So just a case of knocking the grease cap off and taking the split pin out, then the hub nut off, and then the whole hub just comes off in one unit. And those 4 holes on the hub are where the rear of the drum brake would originally bolt to. So we'll just line this up with those holes. It does only seem to fit one way. Just put one bolt in just to hold it in place, and then all the other bolts we just use a little bit of Loctite on as they go in. And I'll redo this one as well. Then just make sure they're good and tight. Couldn't find any torque settings for these, so I just went with as tight as I could get them on the bench. And then just reassembled the hub. The nuts on these just go to 20 Newton meters, I think it was, so not overly tight, just enough just to nip it up. And then just the retaining pin through to lock it in place. Do the exact same on the other side. And then to hold the gearbox up while we take it off all the stands, I've just used some TIG welding wire and just wrapped it around the top struts onto the gearbox, and that's holding it fine. And then a case of just moving the car into position in the garage so I can actually work around it. Luckily it was a nice dry sunny day to do this, so I wanted to get it done this day. Been on these caster wheels for that long, the rubber's gone a little bit soft on them, so it makes it really difficult getting them all facing the same direction to move around. The frame that's underneath the car is high enough up to allow me to get a trolley jack underneath it. So I just lift it up so the caster wheels come off the ground and then just take the caster wheels off. So it gets me about 6 inches of clearance. And that allows me to lower it onto axle stands and then drop the whole frame from underneath the car. The frame's attached in 4 points, so where the rear wishbones go, where the front track control arms go. Then it's on to reassembling the rear suspension components. I'd already got the shock absorbers in, so just a case of getting the rear wishbones on that we just built up. A little bit awkward under the car, but not terrible. So in terms of work that's happened under this car, all the rear chassis legs have been replaced. So this is quite an interesting moment to make sure that everything lines up. Also, most of the section that holds the wishbones on has been replaced as well. Quite a lot of the boot floor and the wheel well's also been replaced. And on the top side of the spring there's a rubber bush, so we'll just get that on there before we put it back together. And then there's just 2 bolts that join the hub to the shock absorber. Then once that's in, it's just a case of getting the tie rod back on there. Bought all new washers for these and all new bushes for these as well. Again, just get them off eBay. Seems the easiest place to get most things from nowadays. And then I'll just do the exact same on the offside. Then moving on to the front, I've got most of this built back up with the hub and everything from when I test fitted the brakes. Got the anti-roll bar back on. So this one just needs the track control arm putting into place, and then the steering rack bolting on. It's a little bit of a faff with this one, but it's not too bad to get in there. The other side, a little bit more work to do. The hubs I'd rebuilt several months ago, put all new bearings and everything in there. So just get that bolted on and then get the drive shaft in. Get the track control arm attached as well. I'm not going overly tight with all these bolts because this is sort of just to get it on the ground. I will go over everything again. There's a few bolts that I am going to replace as well, where I've got multiple of the same bolt. It's a case of just working through and getting the best out of them all, or replacing them with new where I need to. So just looking at the angle of the steering rack, I can see that this side's really far out. So we'll just adjust it to get it roughly close to where it needs to be. And then before I forget, I just need to drill the mounting holes for the caliper out to 12mm. Just use a stepper bit for this. It goes through very easily. Did the other side when I did the test fitting of the brakes before, so just this side to do now. So just for now, we'll pop a temporary steering wheel on the car. This is a Sierra Cosworth steering wheel. It actually came fitted to the car. So for now it will do. I've got a Mark III Escort steering wheel ready for this one up in the loft. For the tyres, I went for some Nankang NS-2Rs. Bought them from Asda Tyres online. They had the best deal on and a bit of discount at the time, so went for there. Went for 195, 45/16 profile. I thought the 45 profile would be slightly safer with the potholes that we get in the roads these days. Just getting them bolted on with a couple of bolts for now. I do need to get some slightly different wheel nuts for these, but for now these will be absolutely fine just for rolling around the garage and the drive. I will need to do some adjustment on the track control arms, just to push the wheel back a little bit. There's a bit of adjustment on these Series 1 anti-roll bar setups, so it's just a little bit forward at the minute, but we can get that adjusted at some point. Just have to be careful with the full lock so it doesn't hit the body kit. Don't have the brake discs yet for the rears. I need some Sierra Cosworth 278mm discs for those. So for now, I'm just going to make a spacer by cutting the face off of an old front brake disc. Cut that off and then just grind it flat, and then that'll make a nice spacer so that the back wheels sit exactly where they should be sitting. Pop a little bit of copper grease on the spacer just to help it stick to the actual hub, make my life a little bit easier when putting the wheel on, and then just get the wheel bolted into place. And then with all four wheels on, it's time to get it onto the ground. Getting the back end down isn't too much of a problem because I can just put a few chocks of wood underneath the rear cross member, lift it up and just drop the axle stands out. The front end, not quite as easy. It was a little bit sketchy doing it like this. I don't have a jack tall enough to get it off the axle stands like this, so it's just a case of chocking up the bottle jack and then just going bit by bit, lowering it down with the axle stands, taking wood out and taking my time with it, but we got there in the end. It was absolutely fine. And then with the car finally on the ground, it can actually move by itself. It seems to roll quite nice and easily. First time in quite a few years it's actually rolled. And then just to finish off, just decided to get the Ford badge mounted back to the front of the car. These are actually non-genuine Ford badges. I got this from an eBay supplier in Germany. I think it's the right colour for the year, but I'm not that worried, to be honest. It looks fine. Didn't realise actually how many Ford badges or different variants there are out there. And with that done, that's the end of this video. Again, thank you very much for watching, and for those that are following this project along, hopefully get some more progress. I've stocked up on quite a few bits for the car now, so hopefully going to get the bottom end of the engine in soon, and a few other bits and bobs along the way. So yeah, thank you very much.